Welcome once again to the Church Answers podcast. Just got to tell you, we've been having this deep discussion. At least Alana, my assistant, and I have been. I can't see the countdown clock anymore on here. So I just want you who are watching and listening to know that I'm going old school, and I've got my iPhone working. So just could not do without my iPhone here. If you listen to the previous episode, you're probably doing a bit of laughing and maybe a little bit of nodding your head in agreement. Maybe not the identical circumstances, but the idea that you've been there and done that. I've been so tempted to tell Pat my stories, but you who are listening and watching this have heard some of my stories, so that's not the purpose of it. But stupidity came in really easy for me, and I had to fight it a lot. And Pat has his own stories of cultivating humility after humiliation. Hey, let me remind you of the book. If you were here last time, we talked about retractions. This is the book by Pat Nemmers, and it is an incredible book that will make you laugh, make you cry, and make you think. And so get this book. We've got it in the show notes where you can link right to it and get the book. And it'll be good for your ministry. It'll be good for your life, and it'll be good for your soul as well. By the way, Pat, I hadn't even welcomed you. You're just sitting there where I'm talking away. Welcome to Church Answers Podcast again, Pat.
It's good to be back with you, Thom.
Well, in this episode, we're going to talk about a low moment in Pat's life, and it's something that I pray I won't go through, but it will happen to a lot of folks. And it's when the pastor loses his wife, and we'll be talking about that. Really want to hear more because when I read the book, I came away from that chapter. That was the only chapter I came away. This is not a critique. This is just my personal digestion of the book. It's the only chapter I came away from wanting to hear a little bit more. And so this is going to be a bonus in some ways to that chapter. I know it's going to be a difficult one, but thanks for being willing to share it. Hey, before we go further, let me thank Belay. You've heard me again and again and again talk about Belay. Just keep in mind that Belay is not only our first sponsor, they're our only sponsor. Usually you have two sponsors for this, but they are both what we call the front and the back bumpers, and they're for all of it. They believe in us. We believe in them. And as I've told you, I go as far back with Belay before they were Belay. I'm not going to tell you what their previous name was because I would hurt their branding, but I go that far back with them. They're incredible. They can provide you that bookkeeper, that executive assistant. We have one now. We've had one as long as I've been a part of Church Answers. Get there, download The Power of Productivity. It's to our listeners and viewers. Go to Thom at 55123. That's THOM at 55123. Okay, Pat, I almost want this to be a monologue. I will interject at times, but let's start with everything from meeting your wife to your marriage and then up to her death. The story was powerful when I read it, and I found a big lump in my throat just imagining and trying to imagine, though I couldn't. I cannot empathize fully. Just give us the story of you and your wife. We know that you have remarried. God has blessed you, and how many grandkids did you say you had again?
We have 38 grandchildren together.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
Go ahead.
Just tell us the story.
Well, my first wife, her name was Nina. I have a grandchild by the name of Nina now. But Nina and I were high school sweethearts. We fell in love with one another. We were both religious, but we were not born again. I heard the gospel when I worked at John Deere. I worked in a factory in Waterloo, Iowa, and that's where I heard the gospel. Soon thereafter, I trusted Christ. I witnessed to my wife. We'd only been married for a couple of years. We just had our first kid. And when I had my first kid, then I started thinking about spiritual things more seriously. Anyway, I was able to lead my wife, Nina, to Christ. And so we started off our journey. We just took off like rockets. And I was off to Bible college. And the next thing we knew, we were having more children. Took a little country church in Clarion, Iowa, out in the middle of nowhere. And our first week, there was 27 people. And the second week, there was 21. I called my brother. I said, this thing's going backwards. He said, get out there and preach like you're preaching at 2,100. And so I did, God blessed, and we grew. I mean, I say we doubled in size in 1 year, but when you're only running 27 people, that's not that many. So,
That's good, though. That's good.
yeah, so we were growing, having a great time, and having a larger family. We ended up having 7 children together. And one night we were sitting and talking, and we were talking about all the issues and problems we were dealing with in people's lives. Now this church was going and growing. We were like 120, 130, 140. And we both recognized that we hadn't had any tragedies in our lives. And unbeknownst to me, I was looking right at one that was just literally around the corner. I went off for I spoke at a high school retreat up in northern Minnesota and came back from that high school retreat, very hot time of year in July of 1995. And my wife and I were talking with one another, and it's 11:30 at night, and we kissed. And the last thing she said to me was, "I missed you so much." And when she said that, she gasped. She was 36 years old, and instantly she had a heart attack and died in my arms.
Oh, wow.
And so I didn't know. It was everything after this was a blur. Ambulance came, helicopters couldn't land because it was foggy. My neighbor, who was an RN, came and did CPR on her, and it was too late. She was gone. And by the time that had happened, we were now after midnight, and so I was just devastated. Went to the hospital, came back from the hospital with some friends. My kids, all 7 of them, are in bed. They do not know what happened.
Oh, this is a powerful part of the story, Pat.
Yeah. So it was about 3 a.m, and I thought, I'm broken. And I thought I have to tell my 14-year-old, my oldest. She was 14 going on 20, very mature young lady and very close to her mother. So I went up into her bedroom, and it was a farmhouse, and it was just a little closet, but a big closet rather, that she turned into a bedroom. And I went in there, and the only thing that was, I had the light from the outside, the hallway was coming in. I didn't want to startle her. And I sat next to her in the bed and just stroked her hair a little bit and just quietly tried to wake her up. Her name is Sarah. And when she woke up, I said, "Honey, I have something hard to tell you, difficult to tell you." And she sat up kind of like, she was incredulous. And I told her that her mommy had gone to heaven. Mm. And that was, I can't think of that moment. I get emotional every time I think of that moment, because all I could hear I can still hear her voice saying, "Oh, mommy, oh, mommy," and holding her for a while. And then eventually telling the rest of the children as the morning dawned. And I'll tell you, Tom, that morning I was in Psalm 69. I don't say this to pat myself in the back, but since September 6, 1982, there's never been one day, not even one, that I haven't read God's word. Not because I know myself, I have to hear from God. And so I was in Psalm 67 the day before. So I'm sorry, Psalm 68. So I was in Psalm 69, and I opened it up, not because I wanted to study the Bible. I just knew I needed to hear from God. And here's what it says: "Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I'm weary from my crying." I mean, it was literally describing me. And then in verses 5 and 6, it says, "Let not those who hope in you become ashamed because of me. Let not those who trust in you become ashamed because of me." That's the psalmist speaking to God. And I pulled back, Tom, and I said, "God, are you challenging me in the early moments of my bereavement?" And it's as if God was saying, "I know there's going to be a lot of sympathetic eyes right now for you, but those same sympathetic eyes are going to be watchful eyes. They're going to want to know if the theology of grace that you preach really works in your own life." Mm. And that's why I think David Bentley said, "Let not those who hope in you become ashamed because of me." They would be ashamed if I handled this thing wrongly. And it was a challenge in the early part of it all. I was brokenhearted, but I was never angry. but my life was literally turned upside down in a heartbeat.
Here's what I want to do. I want to continue the story of how you went through this grieving, how the church rallied around you, and now transition to where you are in your church now. And I want to show the story of God's grace and his victory in the midst of this kind of tragedy. So come back in the next episode, Pat, and we're going to finish this. We're going to finish this with a good high of God, and that is what God is doing in your church today. All right, can we do that?
Sounds great.
That sounds good to me as well. Thank you, Belay. I'm just going to leave it at that. Belay will let me do a short bumper on this one and just say thank you, Belay, for allowing us to tell stories like we have told today. And thank you, as always, to Pat. And once again, I want to show you Pat's book. Pat Nemmers' book is called Retractions. Get it? You'll see it in the show notes, and you can order it immediately. We'll see you in the next episode of the Church Answers podcast.